Well, hey, and welcome back. And if you're here, you definitely now know what's up. You are listening to Life Is Peachy, a nostalgia-fueled podcast that basically allows me to sit here and waffle on for sure, about the bands and albums that became the soundtrack to my life, growing up in the 90s, the early 2000s, and while we're at it, sharing a few memories from Her Name Is Murder Productions. I definitely introduced a lot in the first episode, but I did this with the hope of painting you guys a picture with my journey into discovering music and connecting with it, in the hope of giving some context and a substance towards where I'm coming from and why I feel the need to do something such as this podcast. I love the idea of creating a narrative, a story, each episode adding more substance, more context, creating a narrative that takes you hopefully on a journey and, I don't know, at the very least, kick back with you guys and enjoy some good tunes. Now, the album I am excited to talk about today takes us back to the year 2001. I was turning 17 in the second last year of high school and well and truly into my music. I had a great group of friends and felt really invested in my interests. And it was with some of these mates that I formed a nu metal band. We were called Fake. And it wasn't about being the best band or even being the best singer. I wasn't a singer. I just loved being in a band with my friends and performing to mates. The soundtrack of my adolescence was really shaped by music long before the true impact of cinema came along. Transformers, playing with my Army Man toys, John Woo and action movies in general essentially represented my cinematic scope growing up as a kid.
Ain't it cool?
It was not until the end of high school and coming into university that I would find myself heading into the world of character dramas with a heightened demand for more from my world of film. So outside of action cinema, most of my time and energy, most of my joy came from and was associated with discovering music. So Willhaven came along at such an exciting time. And like many bands that fell into my lap around then, it was the result of research and following a collection of musical breadcrumbs that usually put me in front of what often was to become one of my new favorite bands. And a lot of the time, I was introduced to new artists through various guest spots and features on albums which I already owned. I was very much into figuring out who was linked with who, and grabbing everything involved within that. It was on Soulfly's second album, Primitive, where I heard Grady's voice on the track Pain. This track also featured Chino of Deftones. I just remember being completely floored by the brutal rawness of Grady's voice. It was unlike anything I had ever heard. In terms of a screamer, it was exhausting. And it felt excruciatingly emotional, beautifully pained. So naturally I was hooked. I mean, where did this voice come from? I needed to know. And I had never heard of this vocalist before, and I didn't know anyone in my circle who knew of Willhaven. They were definitely on the rise, but still somewhat unknown in Australia. So I had incidentally found myself on a new mission to discover what this band was all about. And it wasn't too long after this that I came across some of Willhaven's music, courtesy of Metal Hammer's various compilation CDs. Metal Hammer was essentially my gateway into what was happening musically around the world. The internet did exist, but the details of what was on there and also my general access to decent internet was very limited. And we're going back to the days of dial-up. Segue. And while we are talking about the information highway and the wonders of internet, I do need to take a moment to pause the podcast and bring you a quick word from our sponsors. Wait, no, there's no sponsor, no sponsors. Oh, well, this is awkward. Sorry, I read that wrong. I need to pause the podcast to quickly inform you that the following episode may contain echo. Thanks to magazines like Metal Hammer, I was able to stay educated with what was going on, and through their various compilations, I could discover so much new music and know what CDs to ask for or import in at my local music store. The album's debut single, Carpe Diem, ripped through my speakers. Those riffs were ridiculous. A new feel of heavy, for me at least. And in the accompanying music video, there he was again, the man, Chino Marino. Now, at this point in time, Deftones were one of, if not my favourite band, with the likes of Around the Fur and White Pony cementing them as one of my nearest and dearest. And so if I wasn't already convinced, now there was no doubt. This band was going to be something. So in preparation for their upcoming and highly anticipated album, Carpe Diem, I acquainted myself with their back catalogue, WHVN, El Diablo, and their self-titled EP. I worked at Sanity Music at the time. These were import orders in Australia, which meant more dollars and a long waiting time to receive the goods. But I remember feeling pretty damn cool knowing of this band and having to go to so much effort just to get physical copies of their back catalogue. Carpe Diem, the third album by Sacramento's noise metal band Willhaven, was released in 2001 by Music for Nations and Revelation Records and produced by Eric Stenman. It would provide Willhaven their first world tour, headlining many countries and also playing Asia and Australia for the first time, with more and more people becoming familiar with the name outside of the US. And yet at the height of their success, the band would disband, leaving their fans with arguably their most divided release at the time. For myself and many others, it was an introduction and a first impression into the band and their music, and for this reason, it had a profound impact. But what was life like for Willhaven in the year 2001? What did the band think of the album Carpe Diem at the time and now in retrospect? Yes, and as we all know, I can go on and on about this stuff. So I'm really excited today to have another special guest with me joining the Life Is Peachy podcast, the man himself from Willhaven, Jeff Irwin. Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Thank you so much, man, for joining me on the podcast, Life Is Peachy.
Okay, no problem.
Now, what was the state of Willhaven going into the recording of Carpe Diem? Where were you guys at as a unit? Where were you guys at as a band?
It was an interesting time because we had just come off a long tour year on WHVN. We had done tours with like Fear Factory in Europe and Soulfly and Neurosis in the United States and Hatebreed and Vision of Disorder in the United States. And then we did the Slipknot tour at the beginning of 2000. We did like 3 weeks of Slipknot, and that was on their first record. So we were playing 500 to 1,000 seat venues with Slipknot. I mean, imagine that, right? Some of the best shows I ever saw in my life were on that tour. Those guys were young and hungry and full of energy and reminded me of my R cells because they were, from Des Moines, Iowa, and just hungry and no one knew who they were, and they were just trying to make a point, and their shows were just crazy. So I took a lot from that tour because the only time I'd ever really felt that was on the Deftones tour when I felt that hunger. We were going out every night and they were going out every night, and just there was this fire that burned in both of our bands. I learned a lot from the Deftones tour, but then the Slipknot tour was another step with that. It was like, God, these guys are hungry and they love music and they just want to destroy the world, and that was kind of our vision, and so we just gelled really well with those guys.
Oh man, I can't even begin to imagine. It must have been such a trip at that point in time without even knowing it, but in retrospect, witnessing Slipknot in 1999.
Yeah, it was crazy. I'd heard rumblings about them. I think we were on tour with Soulfly, and we were doing the East Coast with Soulfly and Neurosis. And it was the same time that Ozfest was going on in '99. And so we kept seeing these kids show up at the Soulfly shows with Slipknot t-shirts. And like, what the hell is Slipknot? And then, then the word kind of got, we talked to some kids and like, oh my God, I saw this band at Ozfest. They're amazing. And we kind of heard the rumblings about it. But, I didn't pay much attention to it until me and Grady were in England doing some press for, I think, WHVN. Somebody at Krang had given me a CD, and it was a sample CD, and it had Eyeless on it from Slipknot. And I put it on. I was like, I'll check these guys out, and I was like, holy shit.
The kids in California with that Marlon Brando's eyes. That definitely was my reaction also when first hearing Eyeless.
Particularly that song because, everybody had kind of been watered down a little bit. Music, especially metal music was getting watered down. I was like, everybody was kind of like all about the gimmick at the time. And, I saw the mask like, oh no, this is another gimmick band, really? And so I heard the music, I was like, oh my God, this is like stuff that I grew up on. This is like riffs, like real heavy riffs and like groove and some just punk rock like production on it. And I was like, holy, this band's a shit, I was kind of a fan. I went and bought the record right after that and I became a fan of theirs really fast. And then we got a call from them out of the blue. I was at work and their manager called, our manager at the time, who was Gloria Cavalera, Max's wife. And he called Gloria and said, you guys manage Wilhaven? And she's like, yeah, I'm managing right now. And he's like, well, Slipknot wants to take him on tour. And so Gloria calls me at work and she says, hey, Slipknot wants to take you guys on tour. I'm like, oh, really? Like, how do they even know who we exist? And she's like, yeah, you got to be in Iowa in like 2 days. I'm like, oh shit. So we get our stuff and we take off and we meet up with them. And the first person I meet was Clown. I was like, hey, how do you even know of us? He's like, and this is the crazy story, is that when we were on tour with Deftones and Around the Fur, we played this place in Omaha, Nebraska, and it held like 200 people. And Grady was sick that night, so we only played a couple songs. And then Chino kind of came up and sang a few songs for us because Grady couldn't do anymore. So Chino sang like 3 or 4 songs. At that show, Clown and Joey were at that show. And I didn't meet them that night, but they were at that show. And Clown said, when you guys played, you guys blew us away. And me and Joey said, if we ever do our own headlining tour, we want to take Wilhaven out with us. And so, years later, there we were opening up for Slipknot on their first record, and it was amazing. We had such a blast. The shows were amazing. Like the guys, all the Slipknot guys were just sweethearts, like. It was a rad tour. It was one of my favorite tours, and I'm still really good friends with a lot of those guys. And it's just like it was a trip, man.
Yeah, man. I mean, it was such an exciting time for music. That wonderful sweet spot throughout the 90s into the early 2000s.
Yeah.
There was so much amazing, colorful, unique, and intense music going on.
I think musicianship-wise, like, you look at the 60s and 70s for musicianship-wise, but as far as, like, emotion and passion in music, 90s was definitely by far the best. You had so many genres, so many different styles, but everybody had played with heart, and it was all about provoking emotion than it was how good you were at your instrument. Now it's all technical, but back in the 90s, like, it was all about trying to move somebody, and that's why, to me, the 90s was by far, I think, the best music decade as far as metal and rock and stuff like that. But yeah, just that tail end of it really got a lot of momentum, and Slipknot's been able to carry on, so much power to them, man. It's awesome.
The same goes for Wilhaven as well. Album after album, you guys continue to release content that evolves the sound, but also satisfies that desire sometimes a fan can have, which is to honor what the core of the band is. And I think as a fan of Wilhaven, that's such a lovely place to be in, where you know what you're in for, but at the same time, you can be completely impressed and surprised because you can't take anything for granted. And that keeps things really exciting and really, really fresh. Most of the albums that I am talking about do come from that period of my life growing up in the 90s, which was such an exciting time in music. But I really do feel as well that coming into the early 2000s, this explosion of creative expression, this explosion of musical color and flavor really did carry on into the early years of the 2000s. For me, the album Carpe Diem, 2001, falls into this bracket. It was such an amazing, exciting time for album releases. From the cinematic and eerie intro SHR, we can already sense, like always, we are building the tension towards an impending doom. There's no time to second guess as Willhaven come crushing into play with Saga, a song, like many on this album, that just doesn't let up from the beginning to the end. Jeff Irwin provides a soundscape that not only loses you into a trance-like state, but injects it with this tone of despair. As Grady's vocals pierce through the murky onslaught of sound like cutthroat razor blades, you can't help but bounce your head and your body to the insanely groovy rhythms and sludgy breakdowns. Willhaven have this ability to place you in a river of music that is both completely unhinged and eerily calm. I once again come back to this trance-like sensation, where the scope of sound really blankets you and takes you away somewhere. Everything always sounds at stake with Willhaven, like you wouldn't be surprised if the album just stopped suddenly because it was just too impossible to go on. This unforgiving, relentless assault of the senses gets under your skin and becomes a part of you. That's why I truly believe Willhaven fans are some of the most committed and in-tune fans out there. This is more than music. It's primal. It's therapeutic. Did you have a cohesive mentality or a pursuit for a particular emotion and sound when writing this album?
You know, it's funny that we picked Carpe Diem because that record tells a story. So for me, like we've had a similar sound on each record, but to me that was one record like, okay, we need to create something a little different than what we were doing before. I mentioned the Slipknot thing because the Slipknot tour really changed my idea of what kind of direction I wanted to go, because I had become really close with Mick on that tour, and Mick was showing me a lot of, the riffs he'd written for that first record. And I was really intrigued on some of the riffs he'd written. I was like, God, that's genius, So I was like, okay. So when coming home from that tour, I'd kind of gotten a lesson from Mick a little bit on songwriting. So coming home from that tour, I was like really ready to record another record, and I was fired up. I think we all were. The first thing I wrote was Carpe Diem. It was more of like the down-tuned single string stuff. And I'd kind of written that on the road a little bit, so we brought it home. I was like, okay, here's an idea of I wanted to create a riff and kind of build around a riff, more of a riff that I'd, grown up with, like Sepultura and, stuff like that. Carpe Diem was kind of like the test pressing of it. So we wrote the riff and then we kind of rearranged stuff, and Mike, our bass player, helped me create a lot of like the little stuff in between the riff, and then I wrote the chorus, and then the ending riff I wrote at practice. And so I think Carpe Diem was the first song we'd actually really finished all the way through, and then that was kind of the blueprint for the whole record. We're like, okay, Carpe Diem is the blueprint, and now we need to make a record that's going to complement Carpe Diem. And so, we wrote Saga, and then Bats, Alpha Male. And that's always kind of been the thing with Willhaven. So once we have our first song dialed in that we're happy with, then we'll build off that song so we make a cohesive record. That's just kind of how that played out. We were a band that's always been influenced by what we've been through and what we've kind of seen on the road and the people we met on the road and like what we experienced. And so going back and saying we've toured with, Soulfly and Slipknot and Neurosis and Hatebreed, when we got home, we're like, okay, this is the sound we've collected over the past 2.5 years of touring. This is kind of what we've collectively felt, coming into this record. So Carpe Diem is a good retrospect of what WHVN touring years were, and the bands we toured with and influences that we had. So it's a good story book, from where we were at the time.
Yeah, I think for a lot of fans, a lot of Willhaven fans, particularly in Australia, Carpe Diem, the single, was the first introduction into the band. And it's such a brilliant song because it just comes out swinging. How did the title for the album actually come about?
That was all Grady. It's funny because I think that's the only song that Grady gave the title to. Up until then, Mike pretty much named all the songs. Like, we would be at practice, and we'd write a song, and I'm like, what are we going to call this? And he'd give it a name. And that name would just stick.
Working titles, for example, Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah, that's all Mike. Yeah, Mike, our old bass player, who left after, I think, the Hierophant, I think was the last record he played on. But Carpe Diem was Grady's thing, and then Grady's named most of the title. I think I named El Diablo and WHVN. Grady named Carpe Diem, Vordire. So it's either between me and Grady who names the record, but Grady named that record. And I just thought it was a perfect fit and seize the day. And we've always been that type of band where we just kind of, we don't have a game plan. We don't have a future goal. We're just here, we play music and we have fun with it. And Willhaven's always been a hobby. It's never been our job. Let's just enjoy the moment while it's here, because we may break up tomorrow. We may not care tomorrow. We may have some other hobby we want to do. It fit. It totally fit the whole narrative. And that was Grady's whole thing. And if he comes up with something great, I'm on board 100%.
Song after song, the rhythm section is on point, choosing for a more mechanical approach which delivers their expected doom and sludge noise in a completely refreshing and snappy way. The drums are locked in, delivering what is expected but always in a slightly off, uneasy way that as a listener keeps you on your toes as they use repetition almost like hypnosis, zoning you out into another consciousness. How did Mitch joining the band impact the Willhaven sound or songwriting? And what was going on during that transitional period with the changing of drummers?
So Wayne was in the band from the beginning all the way to WHVN. And then he started with me writing. He actually helped me write Carpe Diem. He was there at the beginning of the Carpe Diem writing process. I don't know exactly how it all unfolded, but I remember I showed up to practice and his snare drum was gone. And I was like, okay, and then I think we called him and he said he had to sell his snare drum because he didn't have any money. He wasn't really working at the time. And so the band was kind of just draining on his finances. And, being in a band like us, we don't get paid for shows. We do, but only cover our gas and our hotel rooms and that's it. We don't make any money on this band. We never have made any money on this band. So I understood where he was coming from, and I think he just got frustrated that, we weren't making money, and the songs I was writing were a little kind of not his style because, Wayne is the perfect drummer for El Diablo, WHVN, and Wayne never took drum lessons. He taught himself how to play drums, and Willhaven's the first band he's ever been in. So for the style, he amazes me, how far he came within a short period of time playing drums. If it wasn't for Wayne, El Diablo and WHVN wouldn't have been as good. He made those records what they are, by his driving drumming and his, his pulsing drumming, and even live, he played so hard live and just cut through. And so I've always loved Wayne's drumming, and I think he was perfect for those records. But Carpe Diem was a little more of a different time signature, and it was more laid back drumming, and it was more of a feel, and he was getting frustrated with everything, and he ended up just kind of not showing up to practice and stuff. So I ended up finding this kid named Dave. I don't even know where I met Dave, but he was more of a laid-back, groovy, more of a kind of hip-hop feel to it. Because I grew up on old gangster rap and hip-hop, so, that's always been a huge influence on me. And he was more of that type of drummer, and that was the drummer I was kind of looking for. Me and Dave started writing songs, and, he helped me write Alpha Male, that. Pretty much set the tone for that record. He played 2 shows with us, and then he just wasn't into the whole band thing. He didn't want to be in a band. He didn't want to tour and stuff like that. So he had said he had to bail out. We actually had a show coming up, and he left, and so we had no drummer, and we had a big show in Sacramento coming up. So I got Chris from the band Far to play drums with us on one show. Amazing band, and Chris is one of the best drummers in the world. And that show was amazing. Like, Chris killed it. And we only practiced twice with Chris. We sounded like a completely different band. Like, it sounded so big because he hits the drums so hard. And he's like Dave Grohl. He just pounds those drums. And we sounded so amazing. And so I was like, Chris, you got to play in Will Haven. He's like, I can't. And so I was like, He kind of wanted to start a family and stuff. And he was kind of over the whole band thing, you know. He said no. And so, whatever. And so the crazy thing is that we got a call from Soulfly in the middle of writing Carpe Diem. And so they wanted to take us out for 2 weeks. And we had no drummer. And like, well, we can't pass up a Soulfly tour, right? Mitch, I met Mitch a long time ago, and he gave me a demo from his old band. He said, if you guys ever need a drummer, just call me any call. I'd love to play in Will Haven. I'm like, okay. But this was, months before this. And so I listened to the demo, and it was really, he was drumming with him, it was really good. So I was like, there's potential there if, like, we need somebody. So we get this call from Soulfly. I call Chris. Chris can't do it. So I was like, all right. So I have a band meeting. I'm like, hey, guys, like, what do we do? I called this Mitch guy. We didn't really know Mitch at the time. I was like, hey, man, can you go on tour in 2 days? And with Soulfly? And he's like, I'm in.
Wow.
The whole West Coast tour with Soulfly, and he kills it. And then we come home and like, all right, I guess you're the drummer. So we just started, finishing. We had already written most of Carpe Diem. Dave actually played drums on some of the songs in Carpe Diem, and then Mitch played the rest of the recording. So it's kind of split between a couple different drummers, but Mitch played majority of them though. You could tell like right away that Mitch was going to help the band. Even on moving to Montana, that bass drum thing at the beginning and his groove. Mitch is a funny drummer because he's a very jazz-oriented drummer, but he's very technical, but still has groove. He's one of those drummers that's like, once you set him in motion, he's a machine. He's basically what we needed at the time to kind of push the band in the direction we were kind of going. There wasn't a huge like, oh my God, this band sounds completely different. Everybody was like, oh, I love the new sound. It wasn't that drastic of a change where, you worry when you change drummers, it could change the whole dynamic of the band. But yeah, he fit right in. And he saved Will Haven because when Wayne left, Wayne is more than just a bandmate. He's one of my best friends in the world. He's best friends with all the guys, Grady and Mike. And, he's like our brother. So when he quit, I called the guys and said, you guys want to continue going on? Because without Wayne, it's like, what's the point, Because Wayne is our brother, our family member, and I can't see William going on without him. And it took us a few days to really, like, figure out if we wanted to continue or not, And so Grady and Mike were like, yeah, let's do this. Let's just keep going. We'll find a drummer, and we'll just keep playing. So, Dave helped continue, Brett bridged the gap, but when Mitch came in and became our full-time drummer, like, okay, Will Haven can continue now and not feel so... We were not so depressed that we lost Wayne, So.
Yeah, I can definitely understand questioning whether to continue going forward or not when you guys have grown up together, you're mates, and you're creating music and creating memories because of Will Haven. And like you mentioned, he was and still is, because of that history, such an integral part of Will Haven and those early years of the band.
Yeah, Wayne is still one of my best friends in the world, and I still talk to him every day, and I miss him, he's an amazing person. I do miss him in the band, but as far as Mitch coming in at the right time, that was pretty much kind of a blessing, I'm glad I called him that day, because I don't know where we would have been without him.
So, essentially it was 2 days to learn the entire set, then chuck each other into a van, do the entire tour, that goes well, and you come back from it and offer Mitch the permanent position of drumming in Will Haven.
Yeah, it was a jump in the van, man. And it was tough because, we were set in our ways, me, Mike, and Grady have been best friends since we were sixth grade. So coming into a band where the band's already we're all best friends. We all know each other. We've already been touring around the world for 5 years already. Coming into a band where you don't really know the guys, and these guys have already been established and they have their own habits and their own thing. And, Dave, the guy who was helping me before Mitch came in, he didn't like what he was stepping into, because he had not really toured in a band before, and we were kind of wild at the time and being stupid, and so Dave couldn't hang, and so he's like, I'm out. but Mitch can hang with the best of them. So he came in and he was like, "Oh, you guys want to party? I'll show you how to party. You guys want to like get down? I'm getting down." So yeah, he came in and he added a whole new fire to the storm, you know. So yeah, he fit in perfectly, and he's kind of been the big protector of the band, and you know, William definitely wouldn't have survived without him, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, he's still there now, so
still there,
it goes to show that first tour must have gone well.
He loved it. I mean, that was his dream, you know. Mitch has always had wanted to be in a band and play big stages, and here his first tour, we're playing in front of 2,000-3,000 people with some of the best bands in the world. It's like you can't. I mean, that's got to be amazing.
Yeah, no complaints there.
Yeah, not at all.
A lot of fans talk about Will Haven as a fictional character, and after Saga and Carpe Diem, it starts to feel like we are shadowing the footsteps of his latest journey of self-worth and discovery. Will Haven aren't here to overcomplicate things, but strangely enough, in doing so, create a collection of unpredictable songs that leave you unsure with what to expect next. Bats and Dressed in Night Clothes feature ambient passes to further immerse in this experience. Will Haven are masters in providing space throughout their compositions, presented either droney, ambient, or experimental. These segues, often without vocals, do such a great job in building that anticipation to the returning heaviness. And it's often to a breaking point, extending these sections close to the point of insane repetition. These musical moments give the vocals some space, so when they return, it feels like the stakes have somehow been raised even more. When I was on tour with you guys, Grady mentioned that his favourite song to play live is Carpe Diem. So I have a two-part question for you. What is your favourite song from Carpe Diem to play live? And what is your favourite song from it in terms of a favourite track on the album?
I'd have to agree with Grady on that one. Carpe Diem.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's kind of our hit. It's the song people are going to react to the best. But on top of that, it's fun to play, and it's driving. People are going to bob their heads. And the ending is just, that sludgy riff, the ending is just brutal. So, it's going to go well every time you play it. So it's one of those things you just kind of get hyped for. The crowd's going to get hyped for it. As far as I don't know, I need to go back and really listen to the songs again.
Does that ever happen for you? Do you ever find yourself, looking back over the music or, getting nostalgic?
I do. When we go to write a new record, I'll go back and listen to some old Will Haven songs just to kind of get a vibe and a feel and see kind of where we're headed and see if our new stuff matches up to our older stuff. Last time I listened to it, I think Bats definitely moved me. The ending moved me a lot. The heaviness of that riff, and so I think the ending of Bats was really, I actually told the guys after I heard that, we need to do this back in the set, because that ending is heavy.
The song, in many ways, is a bit of a slow burner, and we build to this huge crescendo at the end. The climax of the song, it just feels so heavy, and it's just so rich with intensity and emotion vocally.
Yeah, and that's why I love Grady, because his lyrics and his voice add to that. Those lyrics, and then the way he says it on those last few riffs, and so I think Bats to me is one of my favorites on the recorded session of it. But yeah, Carpe Diem live, you can't beat that.
In terms of songwriting, song structure, the way you perhaps went about creating these songs for the album Carpe Diem, would you say that a big influence would have come from playing in front of crowds all around the world and getting a feel for what vibed with the audience, you know, what really took things to the next level, what people liked, what people moved to. Did all that stuff, you know, have an impact or have an effect on the creative process and the writing for Carpe Diem?
Oh, yeah. In WHVN, man, it was like we were thrown up against the gigantics of the gigantics. Like, you know, we had to open up for Fear Factor. We had to open up for, like, Soulfly and Neurosis, Hatebreed, Vision of Disorder, Slipknot. Like, we really need to step up our songwriting because, like, we're playing some bands that we need to grab people's attention. And, I mean, there's songs in WHVN that do that, but WHVN was still more of a hardcore, kind of a out there kind of record. So a lot of the mainstream kids that went and saw Slipknot and Soulfly, you know, they had a hard time grasping onto it. And our thing is we've always wanted to go out and just destroy people, you know, and grab their attention. And coming home and writing Carpe Diem, we're like, all right, we need to make some heavy ass shit. We need to keep up with the guys that we're touring with. Yeah, that definitely had a big impact on us because, you know, playing in front of a couple thousand people and you don't want to get booed off the stage and you don't want people to forget about you. It was like, okay, we need to fight for our name. You know, we need to fight to, like, let people know that we were at that show, you know. You know, you want to keep your roots, you want to keep your sound, but at the same time you need to come with something that if you are going to tour and open up for these big bands, you need to come with an arsenal. We have El Diablo, we have the WHVN, now we need to make some songs that are, like, a little bit different, but still pound your face in. Yeah, I mean, all of that definitely led up to break Carpe Diem. If we didn't do those tours, we would probably sound like Neurosis. You know, we wouldn't sound like Carpe Diem. We'd definitely sound like somebody else. It was a blessing, really, you know, going and touring and seeing the world and opening up for these bands. You learn a lot from musicians and crowd and stages and shows. Yeah, it's definitely a learning lesson.
I feel like I can relate to that as well in my own way, because for me, at the end of the day, the most that I bring back into my craft, the most that I evolve is from being out there, you know, in the field, practicing what I do, being out there on set or being out there documenting a tour or in the studio with a band. I'm forever learning, I'm forever growing, I'm forever deciding or figuring out ways to improve or to go about things in a more efficient or effective way that best reflects where I am at that point in time. And that's the fun thing, the beautiful thing about creating is that it's never stuck, it's never still, it's always forever moving forward, just as you are as an artist. And I think that's such a wonderful gift to have. And you are always open to learning. If you're a sponge, you know, your art is never going to stay the same. And I think, you know, staying true to who you are in the moment and exploring that is such a freeing way to create, because you're forever going to be on this journey with your work, with your voice, with your art that is never really going to reach a finish line. And I find that really exciting.
Yeah, there's a difference between being in a band and then being in a touring band, because, you know, when you're in a band, you're in your garage playing music with your buddies, you write music, put it out, you're kind of still amateur status. But when you start touring with bands like Slipknot and Deftones, like, you're in the pros. You ain't fucking around. Like, you can't fake it. And you can't come weak, because if you come weak, you're done. You know, the crowd's going to boo you off the stage. You're not going to buy your records. No one's going to ask you to go on tour anymore. You got to bring it every night, and that's what we had to do. And I think that's why we're still around, because, like, we paid our dues. I think that's what we write the songs we did and played as hard as we did, because, you know, if you don't bring it, you're going to get lost in the shuffle.
Dolph Lundgren, an alpha male. Sorry, just saying the name Dolph Lundgren puts a smile on my face.
It does.
continues this relentless attack, with the stop-starting riffery of Jeff feeling like punches to the gut. In between this is Finest Hour, which almost feels like an intermission to the performance, a song that is both bittersweet in sound and laced with a nostalgia-fueled feeling. Now this is where we come to my favourite part of the journey. The bookends of this album is where it truly shines for me. At the beginning, a shift in tone and pace during the final breakdown sends us into the ending of Saga, which is a riff that just gets me every time. And so is Life. I feel like I am front row of a show, or even Jeff himself on guitar. I always find myself headbanging over Grady's cry. By turning our heads, we drive the nail. Before the final noises have time to fade out, we are thrown into what could almost be considered the magnum opus of the album, the title track. Grady preaches like a leader of a sermon, front and center, with his followers waiting on every word. Shh, quiet. This actually reminds me of a moment when I was back in high school. I went to a school that was based around the ethos of Christ-centered excellence, and every term we had to deliver a devotion to our morning class. And when it came to my turn, I quite honestly wasn't really sure what to do. I hadn't decided what I believed in, what I didn't believe in, and just what it all really meant to me. We were allowed the option to present our devotion through another form of literature. As I was scratching my head trying to figure out what to do, I decided to present the lyrics of the song Carpe Diem to my class, labeling the song as a poem. And I thought, a song about seizing the moment, making every second count, making decisions, moving forward, living life with pure intent was the next best thing to reading something from the Bible. And I just remember feeling really cool and sneaky getting away with reading this in front of my class. Little did my teacher know that the lyrics were for a song from a noise metal band from Sacramento by the name of Willhaven.
Time to kick ass and chew bubble gum.
The beginning of this album is so strong, and the final chapters are no exception. Miguel takes off in a similar way, like a lot of songs on Carpe Diem. No messing around, dropping in with everything all at once, including the vocals. Miguel places the listener on an expected spectrum before turning everything upside down and dropping us on our heads with one of the heaviest and most dramatic track endings. And then we arrive at Moving to Montana, arguably my favourite Willhaven song of all time. But like most bands that will feature on this podcast, it's picking favorite albums and tracks from a collection of amazing content. It's picking gold from gold. Mitch Wheeler opens the track with a mid-tempo drum pattern which has a gallop of direction, but also comes with a feeling of uncertainty or resistance. Do we actually want to go here? And this is brilliant when we look at the theme of moving to Montana. As the iconic bass line from Mike Martin joins the party, we are very aware that this is a swan song of sorts, taking us out to the other side. As Grady writes a reflective character, assessing his life choices, looking to the future, and the hope of more from moving to Montana, I couldn't help but feel myself on a similar road with this protagonist. The track Carpe Diem is an anthem of sorts, screaming at the listener to seize the day and to make it count. And now here we are, packing our bags and at a crossroads. Grady wails, "We will make this work. We will make this work. We will make this work." He continues to scream this over and over, as if trying to convince himself he will, while the final Willhaven riff plays out and becomes incomplete, slowly fading out. And all I can think is, did they make it? Did it work out? So Jeff, at what could be argued as the band's peak at that point in time, why did Willhaven break up soon after the Carpe Diem World Tour?
We were in a good place, we were really stoked, and Revelation was behind us, and then we had signed with Music for Nations on the WHVN record, but then they wanted to pick up Carpe Diem as well, so we were in a really good spot. But it was kind of a weird time because we had just come off probably the best era we've ever had, as far as we went from opening up for bands to headlining our own shows, and then we headlined our own tour in England. We were selling those shows out, and we had our own tour bus, and we had our own tour manager and sound guy and guitar techs, and we had made it, we'd finally made it to where the bands we toured with that we looked up to, things were amazing. And I think it was the point where it's like every band says when you get to that point, you have a goal. And when you get to that goal, is it fun anymore? And so we've been living in a shitty van for 5-6 years and not, eating fast food and trying to find a place to stay at night, and then all of a sudden we have a bus and guitar techs, and we're like, oh shit, we made it. And we're like, okay, this is it. Do we need to go on anymore, But it came to the point where it's like, okay, if we're at this point, we should be making money, right? And we weren't making any money at all. We were still spending money to get there, and then all the show money would go to pay for our bus and whatever, which in retrospect we didn't really need, but to put on a show like that, we were like, well, we kind of need it because at the time it was cheaper than hotels, and plus, we got to the point where okay, well, we've been in a shitty van for so long, let's treat ourselves for once, We deserve it. But, I think we came home and Grady's like, okay, well, if this is where we needed to go, we have buses and stuff, we're headlining shows, we're selling them out, but we're still not making any money, what's the point, I need to start a family, because we were getting older by then, and we weren't kids anymore. And so Grady was like, I need to make money. If I can't make money, then I can't really do this, because I have, I think he already had a kid on the way. And so he was becoming a dad, and he was getting, married. And so it was more of just financially, it was just really hard to keep going. And by the time that I was like, okay, I'll just do something else, because music to me never was about making money. It wasn't about trying to be a rock star. It was more about just playing music. I was like, well, if Grady doesn't want to do it anymore, then we'll just do something else. We'll start another band, and whatever. It's not a big. I'm a songwriter. I can write songs. I'll just find another singer. The weird thing about it wasn't sad to us. You know, we were just like, oh, it's kind of an end of a era. It was more financially than anything. I don't think Grady really wanted to quit. I just think that it was a decision he had to make for his life and his future. And Will Haven's just always been just a fun thing. And when that fun thing becomes a financial burden on you, it's like, okay, well, do I really need this, you know, cable bill if I don't watch TV, you know, kind of thing? Like, I don't need that. I'll save money if I don't have that. So it was the same thing. Grady's like, well, I'd have more money if I wasn't in Will Haven, so I'm just going to have to back out. It was more of that than it was us, you know, not getting along or not having any material. It was just like, it came to that point where there was a fork in the road and we had to make a decision which way to go. I think the only reason we even got back together was because we were financially stable to where we could do it again. But at that point, there wasn't really a future for us as far as making money at it. But the sad thing about it, we got to that point where it became that, you know.
It's a shame when something such as finances can get in the way or overshadow your passion, or creating your art. It can be really hard sometimes to have the space in your head to create when there's the stress of money and, you know, the stress that it can put on the relationships as a result of that. If you can put all that aside, if that was possible, it's really such a free place to be when you are creating. I could imagine that, you know, all of that stress aside, that period of your life, that period of Will Haven's career would be, you know, it would be filled with such amazing moments and memories. So, you know, looking back to that period of time in your life, what are some of the things that come to mind, or what would you consider some of the highlights of being in Will Haven during the Carpe Diem cycle of the band?
I mean, I've always played music. I've always been in bands, and there's things about the other bands that I played in that I missed a little bit and had fun with. But Will Haven was more about friendship. You know, it was more about my best friends. Like I said, I've known Grady since 5th grade. I've known Mike since 7th grade. You know, I've known Wayne since we were teenagers. When we started Will Haven, it wasn't about starting a band. It was more about just creating something with my best friend. When I started Will Haven, I was living with Sean from Far. Stefan was living with me from time to time from Deftones. And so, I mean, I grew up with those bands. And so I wanted to start my own band because they were having so much fun. And I was basically just roadieing for them. And I was like, I want to start my own band. And so I got my best friends together and started my own band. Even the tours that we did at the beginning were with, you know, we did some shows with Deftones and Far. And so we were playing with our friends. You know, it wasn't like we were just trying to start a band and be famous. We were just like, let's go hang out with our buddies and play music with them, you know, because they were already in bands. So it was more about just being with my friends than anything, you know. Unfortunately, we got to tour with Deftones around the world, which was awesome because those were our best friends too. So it was more just about the hang, you know, more about being with your buddies and seeing the world. And, you know, yeah, you get to play a show for an hour, but that wasn't really the whole part of it. It was more about after the show, like going to some crazy club with Chino and Stefan and all those guys and going to after parties and like going and walking around Europe together and checking out Germany. And that was the cool part about it, you know.
Which I suppose is a key ingredient in the longevity of a band, you know. In this circumstance, when a band breaks up, it's not the be-all and end-all of everything because, you know, first and foremost, at the end of the day, you guys are friends. You guys are mates. You guys care for each other inside the band, but more importantly, outside of the band. Yeah, and it wasn't like, you know, we broke up because we hate each other. Like, by the time we were in Will Haven, we'd already fought and hated each other, and we already knew each other from head to toe. There was no weird, you know, fights or anything. But yeah, I mostly missed the hang, because I could still write music, but hanging with my best friends was the part I missed the most. But doing the stuff that we did and playing with the bands we did, and I remember before I started Will Haven, I was a huge Sepultura fan. I mean, Chaos AD was my favorite record, and then Ruth came out, and then I started Will Haven, and we had this little tiny demo tape that we put out, and it ended up in this kid's hands that was Max's son, Dana, who had passed away. Dana had got our demo, I think from Chino. Maybe Chino gave it to him. And Max fell in love with it.
And Max ended up calling my house. I wasn't home at the time, but he left a message, and I'm like, what the fuck world is this? Like, Max Cavalera's calling my house, like, just to say how much he liked my demo tape. Like, that shit's unreal. And when I think about that, I'm like, wow, that is just mind-blowing, you know? It's stuff like that you think about, and you're like, wow, the stuff we did, and the stuff that we got to see, and, you know, the places we played, and that's what I kind of missed the most when I started new bands. Like, okay, now I got to start at ground zero and do this all over again when I already kind of had it with Willhaven. You know, I already paid my dues with Willhaven. But, you know, when it comes to music, you don't really care about that. It's all about just creating and playing music and trying to do something new. And I mean, music's in my blood. My dad was a musician and my uncle was a musician, so it's in my blood. I'm always going to do it. But being able to play around the world and play with your best friends, like, that's, I mean, I didn't join a band in an ad, you know, like, this was organic, and it was created with my best friend, so it's different. This was very organic, and it was grown from our friendship, you know, which was the most important thing to me. That's what I kind of look back on and most proud of.
20 years later, members may have come and gone, the lineup has changed in some ways, but at the end of the day, what remains the same is the fact that Willhaven is, you know, a band of mates that enjoy hanging out with each other and playing music together.
Yeah, and the thing about Willhaven is that we've had members come and go, but the members that have come and go have been within the family. I mean, Mitch was the only person I didn't really know coming into it, but everybody else, like, I've known forever. Like, even the people that replaced, you know, Mike for a bit of time, or some of the guitar players we've had come play live with us. So we've always kept it that way. It's always been family and friends and people that we've been super close with. And I mean, even Adrian, who's playing bass now, like, I've known Adrian forever, way before he was in Willhaven. He didn't even play bass before Willhaven. He played guitar a little bit, but, you know, he started playing bass when I asked him to join Willhaven. So it's really super tight. And it's weird because now I feel Willhaven is probably in the healthiest spot it's ever been as far as, like, the camaraderie and people being excited about the music and touring, and I don't think we've ever been this tight as a band, you know, as far as, like, the music comes first. So I'm really happy with where we're at now, and I mean, 2019 was one of our best years, I think, ever as a band as far as touring and putting out a great record, and just how well we got along and how much fun we had with each other and how excited we are. So it's definitely a new birth of Willhaven. It's always been about family and just being cool and having fun.
Oh yeah, it's really cool to hear. I'm really happy for you guys.
It's cool. It's crazy to keep the thing going after all these years and still have the same passion and love for it.
It's such a huge job to keep something like Willhaven going, I'm sure.
It's the hardest thing ever, man.
Oh, how it pains me to do this.
Wait, I still function.
Wanna bet?
It's a marriage between four people. I'm like, I mean, most marriages end in divorce, and, like, just trying to keep everybody happy is tough. It's mostly financial. It's like, you know, trying to get the whole show going. It's a business, and you can't have a business without any capital. That's the hard thing, is gaining capital to go do stuff. And people think it's glamorous and it's great. Being in a band is one of the toughest things in the world. You know, it's crazy, but it's the torture is worth it when you can play in front of fans and see the world. And it's definitely given me a crazy life, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
You're more than willing, or you're happy to, if it is possible, of course, to put yourself through those hardships, because at the end of the day, it's all totally worth it for the opportunity to pursue or live your passion, to create and to express, to do it with people that you love, to feel great about who you are, and to share that with other people as well.
Yeah, and I think that's what we were talking about earlier, is having your best friends with you is the most important, because when shit gets really bad on the road, when you're with your best friends, it's not that bad. You know, you can still laugh about it, you still feel like you're safe. You know, if you're with a band that you don't really know the members, then it get kind of weird. But when these guys are your best friends, you've known your whole life, you know you're good, right? You know you're going to be safe, you're going to be taken care of. It's not that bad. Having my little kind of, I call them my angels with me, like, it's not as bad as you think it is.
Carpe Diem is close to celebrating its 20 years. Looking back on the album, what would you say about it now, and how does the album sit in the history of Willhaven?
I feel lucky because I don't, some bands have that one record that define them, and what I love about Willhaven is I don't think we have that one record that defines us. I think it was the record that put us over the top, I guess. I mean, El Diablo was the one that got us out into the public. WHVN kind of grabbed the more diverse fan base, but then Carpe Diem was the one that shot us into mainstream, as far as our video was on MTV, the box. Chino was in the video, so that grabbed a bunch of people's attention. But the record kind of held up on its own, and people were catching on. So I think as far as our legacy, that's probably the most important one as far as getting the name out there. It's kind of cool that we have a few records that are kind of legacy records, but Carpe Diem is definitely important as far as the future of Willhaven, that's for sure.
I miss seeing you guys. The one time you did tour Australia back then, the Vans Warped Tour. But that tour featured one of my favourite bands, Australia's Sunk Loto. You recalled seeing those guys live, right?
We had just got picked up by Pete Riedling, who was Tool's manager. I mean, that was another Carpe Diem thing that we actually got some pretty cool stuff out of it. So Pete Riedling was our manager, and he got us on the Warped Tour on Australia. And we looked at the lineup of bands and like, well, we're the only kind of heavy band on the tour. We fly over there and we play our first show, and we play like in this warehouse thing, and it went really well. I mean, I was surprised. The kids actually really liked heavy music. The first show went really well, and then the second night we played one of the bigger stages, and Sunk Loto was played right before us or after us. I was stoked because I was like, okay, there's another kind of somewhat heavy band on this tour. I remember watching them and just digging them. I was like, all right, cool. I mean, there were so many punk rock bands on there that they stood out for sure. Kind of bonded with them a little bit, we were kind of like the metal guys on tour, But yeah, I was digging them. I really dug them on that tour, and I was just glad there was another band that could like be like us. I was stoked that they were on it.
There has never really been a lot of online content when it comes to Willhaven. In 2003, the Foreign Films DVD was released, featuring their last show, at that point in time anyway, and a wealth of footage from the final world tour and of course the Carpe Diem music video. I was a big fan of director Brad Oak's music video back in the day, and as an aspiring filmmaker during that time, it was a really inspiring indie production, and thanks to Brad, there's now a lot of live performance available online, capturing the band during that early period of their career from the late 90s to the early 2000s. Working with Willhaven in 2019 would also provide my first experience to witness them live. I was lucky enough to join the guys for a few shows in the UK. So I have this process I use to manifest working opportunities, which involves creating a playlist on my phone with all the bands I really want to work with. And when I go running, I listen to this playlist on shuffle over and over and start mapping out concepts and putting it out there into the universe. So beyond applying for the job, I also have this little extra special thing I do. I'm not labeling it spiritual, but I definitely am a firm believer in applying my mindset to something I want and not stopping until I achieve it. I was living in Lisbon at the time, and I knew the UK tour was coming up later that year, so I put together my proposal for the band and management, and for the next few months had Willhaven's back catalogue on shuffle, on repeat, with each run. Now flash forward to later that year, and I'm crammed front and centre in one of the smallest, sweatiest rooms I've ever been in before, both filming and headbanging to Willhaven for the very first time in my life, along with the rest of the crowd. And it was a dream come true, working with another band whose posters lined my bedroom wall and CDs filled my rack and followed me throughout my adolescence to now. That crazy hot small venue in the UK called the Anvil.
Oh shit!
Yeah, man, I really had to keep it together because I was smack bang just right on the front bar to the left, and I had to incorporate this style of filming, which was a mix between vicious headbanging and guerrilla style filmmaking, because this often happens when I'm working with a band that I love and I am seeing them for the first time. I have to combine that that mentality of fan and filmmaker, and within that I get to enjoy the music and also do my job. Yeah, so man, like to not only work with you guys, but to finally see you guys live was an honor. It was a dream come true, man.
That's kind of cool. You got to see the Anvil show because 200 people at the most, and it was just packed and sweaty. Kind of like how the beginning was Will Haven's career. Like we used to play the sweaty club, so it's kind of cool. You got to see that.
Dude, the Anvil, it gets sweaty in there.
Yeah, you got to see the hardcore part and then the rock part.
Congratulations are in order because we do have the Will Haven anniversary this year, which is just a massive, massive milestone. So huge congratulations to you guys. What juicy secrets, what goss can you give up, for the fans? What's going on this year for Will Haven?
Yeah, so we actually did a really rad Foreign Films Part 2 with you. It came out amazing. That will be coming out soon. The small documentary of kind of the newer version of Will Haven, but it turned out awesome, so that'll be coming out. We're working on our new record now, and it's fucking killer. I love it, and hopefully that'll be out next year. I'm sure spring or summer next year. We'll probably have hopefully some videos. Hopefully we can do one with you again. And then we've got Download UK next year. Cross fingers, that goes as planned. Same day as Deftones, so that's going to be rad. And actually Sepultura is on our stage, which is going to be crazy. So hopefully next year will be a good year, not just for us, but just for music in general. And we can get out there and play and a new record come out. And I think we're going to just slowly build up to next spring as far as new music and content and stuff. So cross fingers, everything goes well.
I was such a huge fan of the Foreign Films DVD when that was released. Oh. And, you got to remember that this is going back to a period in time where the most effective way to learn about a band that you were really into was by going out to the shops and buying the VHS or DVD documentary, because, that detail of content just wasn't on YouTube like it is now, and there wasn't Wikipedia where, everything's just at our fingertip. We're curious about a band or we have a question about a band, we can simply just go on our computer, type it up, ask the question, bam, there's the answer. So I have always been so excited and invested in purchasing the band documentaries, and that really is what created for me and went into my desire to do that and to continue doing that with music documentaries. It all stems from back in that period of my life, watching those and learning more about the band. And I want to kind of continue that tradition with my work. So it was so exciting to continue that foreign film story, to be able to create with you guys. And so I just really want to say thank you for the opportunity and thank you for that.
Oh yeah, and it was awesome. Like we never really had, you were like the first person we actually had to come with us on the road and document kind of stuff. And, we were all like, we never really had that. It's kind of weird, especially traveling like the way we were. It was like, but you came along and fit right in with us, and it was a blast having you with us. And you killed it. I did not expect what I saw to be the end result. It's amazing, and you definitely took where Brad left off, but I think you created something more mature and more Will Haven and more us now and just captures us perfectly. So yeah, we were all stoked. We were all watching like, holy shit, like this is badass. Like this is like foreign films, but it's definitely foreign films, the mature foreign films, you know, and like it's rad. So, and even the video you did, I mean, people love that video that you did. So, for Winds of Change. So yeah, you got talent, my brother.
Oh, man. Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, my job was made really, really easy when what I have to work with as a soundtrack is the music of Willhaven.
Excellent.
You never know what you're walking into coming into a tour, and you just have to do the best that you can. You know, thanks for bringing me in like family.
I give you much kudos on that, because I mean, I've been best friends with Deftones my whole life, and I went on their tour bus for one night, and I was like, should I be here? Even though they're my best friends, I feel like I'm stepping on their toes. And I'm not doing anything. I'm just kind of hanging. So going into a band where it's like they're on tour, you don't know anybody, they got their own program going, it's like, I get it, you know. But you're such a cool guy. You just fit right in, and no one even knew you were there half the time. And just like, yeah, it takes a special individual to walk into that kind of community and that kind of scenario and not rub people the wrong way, or, you know, because you don't know who you're dealing with. How many people were on tour with us? Like 6? So
yeah, and also every day is just a different day. A lot of the time there's no consistency.
And everybody has a different personality, and it's like some people are bitches, some people are cool, like you don't know. So for you to walk in there and just become one of the band members, it's a testament to your personality and how cool you are. So yeah, I think you're probably the only person that could probably pull that off with any band, you know.
Will anyone else attempt to fill his shoes?
What did he say his name was?
I wish I had an answer or some secret recipe for that. And I guess in some ways I have my methods. But yeah, when there's many people involved and there's so many exterior factors beyond yourself, all you can do is just turn up on the day with the best attitude possible and just try and decipher the vibe. I try to do the best I can with being a fly on the wall, getting what I need, but, you know, not getting in the way and standing on people's toes. That's really important for me. I really want to organically try and fit into the mold, and you can't force something like that. I think people can sniff that out if you do, and it can be hard because you really want to be liked and you want to fit in, but sometimes just letting things breathe and letting them happen in their own natural way is the best way to go. And that can be hard when there's time pressure, because a lot of the time you're not blessed with having that space. So it's this weird balance between not forcing yourself into something, but trying to do the best you can to make what you need to make happen within the small amount of time that you have to work with.
Yeah, and you, I mean, your first band, you know how crazy tour life is. It's no joke. So to be able to roll the punches and whatever the band's going through, you got to go through too. That's no joke, you know.
One of the most exciting things about Willhaven is they didn't peak with Carpe Diem. They returned to making music a few years later and have continued to release albums that in many ways keep them ahead of the curve and a firm staple in the hearts of their fans. This cult status that has been gifted to them seems to make them such a special band amongst fans, a feeling that remains to this day. This year they celebrate their 25th anniversary, and I'm so proud to be a part of these celebrations with the upcoming documentary and to also have the opportunity to talk with my friend today. So thanks so much, Jeff, for taking the time and joining me on the Life Is Peachy podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I can't thank the fans and people like you and people that actually care about us, because, you know, we just create music to just create music and have fun with it, but to reach people is like, that's the ultimate high, you know, to connect with people and unify people and have something in common with people. It's an amazing feeling, you know, and it's probably my favorite thing in the world is being able to like connect with people and be on the same vibe with them musically. Music is just vibrations, you know, and it's like when you can connect vibrations from me to somebody else, that's what humanity is all about, you know, and I love that, and I wish the whole world was like that. But yeah, thank you to the fans for just like being part of my life and being part of our lives. Life would not be the same without any of you. So I thank you for listening and enjoying us and having a place in your heart for us, man. It means a lot.
Yeah, stoked. Episode 2, done and dusted. What did you guys think about my chat with Jeff Irwin from Sacramento's Willhaven, discussing the epic, the iconic Carpe Diem 2001. What a time to be alive, right? But I am actually curious to hear what you guys are thinking about this show so far. We are now 2 episodes deep. I have more episodes ready to bring you guys, lots of exciting guests as well. If you are enjoying the experience so far, it would help me out a lot actually. If you could head over to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, leave a review. Also follow the Instagram page at Life Is Peachy Podcast. I'd love to hear about some of your favorite albums that have made an impact on your life, that have really found a special place in your heart. So let's get the communication going. If there's any of you guys out there that are scratching your head thinking, well, what's next? What is episode 3? Believe it or not, there are ways to find out. And without this sounding like a shameless plug, I have created a Patreon to help continue this podcast, to help continue this passion project of mine. You can head over to patreon.com/lifeispeachypodcast. Go check it out. See if there's something that seems worth your while, something that rewards you for your time and investment. By becoming a patron, you receive perks that hopefully you find awesome, such as the early reveal of every future episode's guest and album, and you also gain early access to the next episode before the general public. There's going to be a stack of bonus content also, and the platform for you guys to ask me questions per episode, because there's always more that can be shared, and I do my best to try and cover as much as possible. But yeah, if there's things unanswered, now you have a way to ask. But I am blabbering on, aren't I? What I really want to share with you guys now is the final hurrah from the album Carpe Diem. From, like I mentioned, quite possibly my favorite song from the guys in Willhaven, but most definitely my favorite moment from any song by Willhaven. The outro from Moving to Montana. I've been very much looking forward to this, so I'm going to kick back now and really enjoy this moment. Until we hang out again together for episode 3, take care of yourselves and each other, guys. I hope you're all doing well, and thanks so much again for your time. I know I keep going on about it, but it really does mean so much to me. Big love, and yeah, catch you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
You know, I can eat a peach for hours.
This episode was written and edited by myself and recorded from the comfort of my own home,
DIY style.
with each guest calling in from wherever they happen to be around the world at that particular time. The Life Is Peachy theme song is an original tune for this podcast, written by Tim Richardson. All music featured within this episode is used by the permission of the credited writers and band management. Further details can be found in the description of the specific episode, along with any relative and interesting links. All artwork is original and illustrated for the Life Is Peachy podcast by Chris Lisa Liefting.